Hello, crafty viewers. Today's card is going to be a fall shaker card. And as you can see, I have a huge collection of stuff here that went into making this project. So, first off, let's talk about the dies and the inspiration for this project. So the inspiration was this shaker card that was in the October 2016 Paper Pumpkin Kit. I actually was thumbing through the Stampin' Up! Website when I saw the refills, which contained this absolutely swoon-worthy paper in this envelope, and had to actually sign up for Paper Pumpkin in order to buy the refill kit. And then I went out on eBay and I found the original kit for sale so that I could get the stamp set that went with it, as well as this is the stamp set. And this we saw in the prior video. The first thank you card that I made actually came using the stamp set from this shaker card in the Paper Pumpkin. So I like to kind of find ways to do the same thing using supplies that I have around the house. I didn't really like the idea of having to sign up for Paper Pumpkin, but I did, and wanted to provide you, my dear viewers, with a way to recreate a card similar to this on your own with supplies you might have on hand. So the first thing I did was I mapped out what would my card look like. And I went through the dies that I have on hand and found that I had two different kits of fall leaves, since I do kind of like fall crafting. And I had the Spellbinder set, Fall Foliage, as well as the Thinlit set. That doesn't seem to have a name on it. Fall Foliage. There we go. And found leaves that I liked the shape of, that were consistent in size. And so when I looked through these two kits, I came up with these three dies. Now, obviously, if you take a look at an A2 sized card, there's no way these would fit on there. Well, I suppose they might have, but it would have taken up the entire card for the shaker window. So that was going to be too small. So I mapped out on a piece of grid paper some boxes so that I could see how these would lay out. And I came up with this, which will accommodate each of these three dies. I then cut this out of just a plain piece of copy paper, and I actually made a copy of this that goes in my handy dandy notebook. So if I want to use it for a different kind of shaker card, say maybe a snowflake shaker card, I would have it to use again in a handy spot where I can always find it. So after I got my layout set, I kind of like to pre-visualize everything. So I took these two papers and just made a simple photocopy of them just to see how it would look if I used either of the papers. I knew I wanted to use the brown as the background, and so I just wanted to see which one I like better. I still don't really, even now that I got the real ones cut to size, don't really know which one I like better, so we'll see what ends up on the card as we go along. I have a little scrap of the brown cardstock, and that will be used to go behind the sentiment. And the sentiment will go on one of these two ribbons, so we're going to kind of do this on the fly as we go along. I then had to go and look and see what I had for sequins. Last year at Michael's they had this jumbo glitter sequin set, and I picked up one in fall colors and two in Halloween colors because I think they were like maybe $1 or $2 each on clearance. Didn't really know what I was going to do with them and had them on hand, so when this project came along I knew that those would go into it, as well as these Doodlebug design sequins. This is the Bonbon Brown color set of them, and those are the sequins that we're going to use a mix of. In addition, for the background, I am going to use this Crackle background and the Cajun Craze ink. And I know that there is a Bo Bunny Textures stamp set that has a stamp in it very similar to this. You wouldn't have to use a paper pumpkin stamp. I do know that I think somewhere in a box I have this similar stamp from Bo Bunny. It's been at my local craft store for the last couple years, so I'm sure it's still commonly found. And the Cajun Craze. I just love fall, and if nothing speaks to me better than this Cajun Craze ink. So we'll be using that. We will also be using some chocolate chip, and that will be to stamp the sentiment on our little piece of cardstock here. This was created using the Lots of Labels Framelits dies from Stampin' Up! There is a punch that currently came out with, I believe, their holiday catalog that has a similar shape to it. However, the only problem with that punch is that it's just one size, and what I really liked about these dies is that you have graduated shapes, so that you can have one die for your sentiment and then a outline behind it in a contrasting color. So we're going to use that. Every shaker card needs a good set of foam tape. Here's the shaker card window. This is, I believe, from Graphics, and I just cut it to size so that it will fit nice and all the way around with a little bit of extra on each side around the different windows that we have. Now, what will be a little bit different between this shaker and the Stampin' Up! Inspiration is that you can see on here the sequins can fly back and forth all the way through. And for this card, I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to have the sequins stay in place within each different color window. So we're going to have little pieces of the foam tape that go across as well as vertically on either side. And I have a piece of chocolate brown paper. This came from the Chocolate Lovers collection from Coordinations. It is an older paper pack that I have. The newer one, I'm not sure if the brown matches exactly. They did change some colors in it, and I don't know about the brown. As well as just a Nina cardstock base that's cut to 10 inches by 7 and folded to 5 by 7. These are 2 1/4 inches by 7, and that leaves enough space around to have a little bit of brown on each side. So let's get started. Now, first things first, we want to take the dies and the brown paper, and we want to go and alright, here's where the truth comes out. I actually pre-cut the paper, but I'll show you what I did. So we want to take the brown paper, and we want to align the dies within the template exactly in the orientation and location that you want them to appear. So I kind of liked having a little bit of variety with the direction that they're facing, and I wanted to have a little bit of variety with, these are more pointy, this one's more rounded, and so I didn't want pointy next to pointy. So I laid them out like that. I taped them down with some micropore tape, and then I ran them through my die cutting machine. through the magic of TV, this is what we get. So now that we have the card base cut, now we're going to go about figuring out what we want for the background. And for that, we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. For the area that goes behind each window, I wanted to have something similar to what they did in the Stampin' Up! Paper Pumpkin example. And so I busted out my very favoriteest paper packet from Recollections at Michael's. I wait until these are $2 each, and this one is Spice Market. I use this all the time, and you can see I even have 2 on hand, and this one I've gone through quite a bit of the cardstock in this one, and in fact it does appear that the brown came out of this package. So pretty much most of this card will be built using paper from this package. I cut a sample of 2x2 out of 4 different colors just to see which ones I like best once I get the crackles stamped onto them, and line those up. If you don't have the Cajun Craze ink from Stampin' Up!, there are some alternatives. So kind of in the spirit of this being a card that's an alternative to Stampin' Up! Products, Cajun Craze is very similar to the Memento Morocco ink or to Potter's Clay. And these little dewdrops are a couple dollars each, so a nice easy way to come up with a substitute. I am going to use the Cajun Craze, however, I'm sure that the Potter's Clay would work just as well. So with that, let's get to stamping. Now these are 2 inches by 2 inches, and if you think about it, you're going to say, well gosh, won't the edges show? However, I wasn't worried about that. The leaves, when they're stamped out, are much smaller than the overall edge of the paper. So I'm pretty sure that you won't see any of the outline, any of the white from the edges of the little shaker windows. Which is a good thing because the stamp is not quite 2 inches by 2 inches. So it was sufficient for the little tiny windows here in this card. It'll just be right on the edge of these larger pieces. Now I'm not going to worry about stamping this off beforehand. This is intended to kind of be a little crackly, so if it's not perfect, plus with all the stuff going on, you're never going to notice. But I will make sure that I do get it right in the middle so that on the edges of the leaves there aren't any bare spots. And this just gives it a little bit of interest and texture in the background. So we got that. Now let's line these up behind and see how that looks. Because I'm kind of liking these three. I think the yellow might be a little too yellow. Well, that looks pretty good. So now we're going to pull out our handy dandy template and our card base. And we're going to use the template to line it up exactly where these will go. And that way you don't have to worry about figuring out, measuring or anything, where on the page you want to put down the backgrounds. Okay, make sure those are firmly adhered, and then you can just pull off the template. And we are ready to start working on the shaker windows. So now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tape down the piece of window material. And this window material is from Graphics. It has this protective coating on it. What I did find when I cut it another piece exactly to size was without this edge, it was really hard. Well, now it looked easy, but it was really hard to get the protective coating pulled off of it when there was no edge to start pulling from. So I am going to take this and I am going to put the tape right along the edge as opposed to on the paper. That way when I set it down I know exactly where the tape's going to go. And I did cut this a little bit wider. You want to take a look at our website for all the measurements on everything. But this is cut to 2 3/8 to make sure that I had a little bit of extra of an edge around so that it was actually wider than the 2x2 windows. Because one of those dies did come right up to the edge at one corner. So we're just going to adhere this down on top of here, making sure that you don't see the adhesive anywhere. And there's one little edge did come a little close, so I'm just peeling this back a little bit. go. So now we got our window, and now we're going to take our tape, we're going to cut it into little thin pieces, and we are going to go around and across the middle so that each leaf becomes its own little compartment. So I'm going to start with the cross pieces. And from this one piece of tape, I should be able to get 3 pieces for each of the 3 sections. There we go. Now we want a piece long enough that goes about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge on each side. And this one I'm also going to cut into 3 pieces, and that way I'll have enough for the 2 cross pieces down on this top and bottom. Now, these are Teflon scissors, and you can see that this pulls off really easily. Which is good when you're cutting a lot of really sticky stuff. Wait. Now, I did find that Stampin' Up! Actually sells pre-cut little strips like this. I don't know if it's available anywhere else, but I can tell you, definitely worth the money, no matter how expensive it is. Because that first piece was easy to cut. When you get to the second piece, where it's just 2 thin strips, it just becomes a little bit more unruly. Now, I am making sure that when I set the tape down, that it's clearing the edges of where the leaves are cut out. Gives us a little piece left over. Alrighty, now for our sequin mix. As I was preparing everything for this card, I actually pre-mixed sequins, and this little bag that it's in, I actually found at the craft store because I like to have little bags that will hold all sorts of little pieces, and for when I have spare die cuts that if I'm cutting out something, I'll sometimes make a few extra. And these little tiny 3x3 bags are perfect to hold extra things like that, as well as to hold sequin mixes for shaker cards. These little things are getting everywhere. Not as bad as glitter, but not too much better than glitter. Now you'll see in this Stampin' Up! Collection that there's actually had greens, coppers, and a light gold or a silver. And this is a beautiful collection. I didn't want to try to be buying all sorts of glitter to replicate it. I wanted to use what I had on hand. So ours is just going to have fall colors without a green in there. Okay, so we have our card base. We have our shaker card. Peel off all the tape and lay it down. Now, the one thing that I do like to do is use a stamp positioning tool as a corner to lay these down. That way it takes a lot of the guesswork out of aligning where it's going to go. So I will be right back while I go grab that. Okay, so here is our Tim Holtz stamp positioner. I just got this, and this is actually my first time using it. So I'm going to pull this off. We don't need the lid, we just need the square edge here. And I'm also going to move the magnets off to the side because we don't need those either. What we do need though is this nice square edge so that we can simply just set the card top down on it. And we also need to take out any dog hair that might have jumped in the card. Now the thing to remember when you're setting this down is which direction the colored part needs to go. So just make sure you know exactly where that needs to be. Because the last thing you want is to get everything nice and secure, flip it over, and find out that there's no color behind it. Okay, last piece here. You will notice that I worked my way from furthest away closest to me. That way, as I was laying my hand down, it didn't get stuck on the sticky tape. Boy, this tape, once you cut it, it was really hard to pull the backing off. So there we go. Now, as I've been struggling with this, I've also noticed that we have a little bit of an imbalance of sequins here. So I am going to add a little bit more straight from the bottle of the big sequins in the middle. there's enough edge around that they'll get lost, so I don't have to worry about there being too many. And now all 3 sections have about the same number of sequins in them. Alrighty. So, I'm going to use this to lay down the very edge, only because I can still pull the magnet out later on. I'm going to flip this over, and without touching down the tape too much, I will get this aligned along the edge. Now, the Misty is a lot easier than this. The Misty has much higher edges than this Tim Holtz platform. However, my Misty already has some stamps set up on it that were really hard to position, so I'm using this one. And there we go. Okay, now that we have this all ready to go, now it's time to decide exactly what we want the front to look like. I do have a couple of different options. Both of these ribbons came from Michaels in their fall ribbons section. Fall color, they are fall into color. They are both now heavily marked down, like 60 or 70% off. And so we either have this paper, which looks nice. I do like that. I do like this ribbon with that. This is one of the Designer Series papers from Stampin' Up's Painted Autumn collection. On the back is actually my absolute favorite paper out of that collection. So if we don't use it for this, I won't be heartbroken. And this came from the Cartabella Hello Fall collection. And you'll see that in the mini album that I'm making. Well, I kind of like that too. And this ribbon actually goes really nice with that. So if you're making multiples of this, you'd have some options. And I think I like this combination better. So before I stick down the Designer Series paper, I probably would have gone with this if I had used the yellow. Before I stick down this onto here, I do want to adhere this onto the back of the card here. This paper does go edge to edge on this card, and I liked that better. I also liked having the stronger wheats pointing to the right. So as I lay this down, I'm going to keep that in mind. Now, because we already had tape foam tape underneath for the shaker part, I didn't want to add additional dimension onto the card, although I may do that with the thank you greeting. So for this little thank you greeting, I'm going to take a piece of the scrap paper, and I'm going to use the die that's one size larger and cut that out. Or not. That seems like that's an awful lot of an edge around that. That's more like a 1/4 inch around on each side. So I'm actually going to skip that. And we will simply use this raised up. I think there's enough contrast, especially with the ribbon behind it, to see that. And that would be a lot of brown, so we don't want that. So we are going to take our handy dandy little thank you. You could also say hello or best wishes. Probably even fit a thanks to you or with gratitude. Ooh, you know what? I think I like the with gratitude on this one. So, you will see there's now a Misty in the middle of the table. And that was because I was doing a little bit of research on what I wanted for my sentiment. And I tried out a couple different things. So here you can see that, start here, I stamped just the with gratitude with some of this Delicata Celestial Copper ink. Now, when I held that up to the rest of the card, it just didn't seem to have enough oomph. But I thought it would be nice to have something a little bit more sparkly and shiny. So I tried a couple of my Lindy Stamp Gang embossing powders on top of just the chocolate chip ink. So stamping with Versamark ink, loading up the stamp with that, and then putting that into the chocolate chip, and then stamping and putting the powder. This was Cafe au Lait. You can see from this one that while there's a nice little shine to it, this one actually had some solids in it, and the coffee color was really blocking the chocolate chips, so chocolate chip wanted to win out. Then I tried the Magic Moon Perfect Pearls, and while it looks nice on camera and you can see some sparkle and shine to it, it really washed out the color quite a bit, and I just didn't like how that looked. I did try stamping first with the chocolate chip ink and then with the Celestial Copper, and once the chocolate chip ink had a chance to really soak into the paper and smooth out, it looked really nice. Now, I did this by hand the first time, and I know on camera it would never ever work again. So I did bust out my Misty. I did pull off the project that I already had loaded up in there and have it aligned on our little piece. We're ready to go. So the first thing that we're going to do is close the lid to pick up the stamp. Then ink it up as a base with the chocolate chip ink. And because it's the Misty, if I don't get it right the first time, you know what? I can always restamp. With the handy dandy magnets, it's held down and it should stay in place. Let's that a good press. Let it sit for a second. That looks awesome. Now, I'm going to take the Delicata ink clean off the stamp a little bit, and then we'll use the Delicata ink. Now this ink, I am going to make sure that I get a good amount on there. And the pad being a little bit smaller does make it a little easier to get that inked up really well. Now because this is a pigment-based ink, you probably could even put some embossing powder on it, but I think that just with that amount of shine and shimmer on there, that'll be sufficient. Give it a good press. And there we go. That looks perfect. Now you may be wondering what that is in the background. I use these leftover jam jars to hold my paper towels so that they don't get on the table or the tablecloth, or more importantly on paper while I work. And they're right next to my blue bottle here. And there you have it. That looks awesome. Just enough shine, not too much. And there we go. I am going to raise this up on a little piece of foam because I think that'll look good behind here. And I am going to be careful not to get my fingers on that, just in case it's not dry right away. Now this is an older roll of foam tape that just does not want to give up the backing. I'm going to align it in the middle, right above this middle flower. And because this does seem to have a little bit of play in it, I'm going to use a big glue dot right behind there to hold that down. And that way the ribbon won't bounce around. Almost looks like a contact lens. There we go. And there is our fall shaker card. Here's the inspiration, and here's our replica. Now this would be good even for a fall birthday card. And the thing I like is, look, when you slide it back and forth, all the sequins don't go sliding to one end like they do on this one. Well, here they're all bunched up down at the end, now they're at the other end. Now you don't see them unless you're like right in the middle. So I do like having each little compartment separated from the rest. I'm going to leave the inside of the card blank. You can put your own wishes in there. And that is our project for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe so that you can be updated with more videos. Have a great day and happy crafting!